What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to NFL Turf Talk here on DSM Media's Turf Talk YouTube channel. Guys, first and foremost, make sure to smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications for whenever we post, for whenever we go live. It is also the best spot to get your thoughts and comments pulled up here on the screen with your host. I'm one half of them, Dylan Davis. To my right, my co-host, Scotty. On this episode, for this video, we are going to be going over our top 10 defenses heading into the 2023 season. We did everything imaginable on the offensive side of the ball. Quarterbacks, trios, QB to receivers, running backs, tight ends, everything you could imagine. So now we got to get into some defensive talk, man. It'll be an interesting conversation, but how's it going over there?
No, it's good, man. It's obviously fun to get into the top 10 defenses in the NFL. We're obviously doing it a little bit more holistic than the offense, but I think it's a little bit easier to examine offensive players, right? And how to measure their performance. So like for us to sit here and grade out, out of however many CBs there are, you know what I mean? It's not like you can sit here and grade them out on pass deflections or interceptions.
Right.
Like it's not that simple when you're looking at, players in the secondary, linebackers. It's not as simple as tackles, right? It's not as simple as sacks. So like defense is just a whole other world where I think we would need almost another like 8 weeks to get through like what we would want to get through and do it as thorough as we would want to. So I think this is the route to go. Where we can just look at these teams holistically, right? It's similar to fantasy football. You don't sit there and pick defensive players for the most part. You pick a whole defense. So that's kind of what we're doing here today. And I think it should be interesting because there's a lot of different ways you can go with this list. I think like top 4 are locked in, I would imagine. We'll see if we match there. I feel like the top 4 defenses in the NFL are locked in as far as who they are, whatever order you want to put them in. But then after that, it's complete discretion, right? It's your perspective. Yeah. It's what you prefer. So should be interesting.
No, I think it's a cool point because sometimes with defensive players, when you're talking specifically like a spot like corner, right? Yeah. Sometimes less is more. So it's hard to put a value on a corner because you can look at numbers and statistics, and you mentioned pass deflections. You can talk about interceptions and everything like that. But sometimes like just take a guy like James Bradberry, who just made second team All-Pro last year.
Right.
Well, he was barely targeted. So if you were just going down looking at numbers, James Bradberry's numbers aren't going to pop off the page at you, right? But because he was hardly thrown at, but less is more in that category. So exactly. It'll definitely be fun to get into, man. But instead of kind of doing what we've done for the skill positions on offense, where we've kind of gone 10, 10, 9, 9, I'll run through my list. You'll give me your list, and then we'll kind of just dive into this conversation. Guys, feel free to drop your comments along here with us and let us know what you think of our list, if we left anyone off, who's too low, who's too high. But the first thing that I'll say is I feel like defenses come off as a lot deeper than some offenses do across the league, right? Like it's so the league is so quarterback driven now. It's such a pass happy league, and we look for points and we love explosiveness and everything like that. But there's not a lot of top tier offensive units where I look at this top 10 list, and I could probably keep going down to around like 12, 13 area where I could say these defenses are solid, man. So this was a tough list to make, but I'll start at number 10 and I'll go with the New Orleans Saints, who I have winning the NFC South division. This is a team that I think could be slightly higher or just drop right outside of the top 10 for me. Obviously, when you talk about a guy like Cam Jordan up front, you talk about Tyrann Mathieu, Marshawn Lattimore. They have a lot of names, but it does feel like that Saints defense has started to decline slightly over the last year or two, but I still think they're a top 10 defense, especially inside of that dome, right? Coming in at number 9, I was doing some research, and this team isn't a unit that I found inside a lot of people's top 10s, but I'm going to put them in mine. I do have the Denver Broncos, man. I think if it wasn't for horrific quarterback play, if it wasn't for Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson and everything that the offense did wrong, the Denver Broncos could have been a playoff team with how solid that defense was, right? And you talk about obviously maybe the best corner in the league in Pat Surtain out there on the outside. So I have the Broncos coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8, this is a team that's just always going to be solid. And you might have this team a little bit higher. I know a lot of people did, but the New England Patriots. And the reason I have them a little bit lower than where I saw a lot of people place them, some people had them 4, 5, 6. I have them at 8 because for me, at least, I know it's not a great reason, but they lack star power. They
have a
lack
lot of
big
like
names.
above average guys.
Right. They have I know they have Matthew Judon. They have guys, and you're led by Bill Belichick, who's a defensive minded head coach. He's always going to have one of the league's best units if Bill's coaching in Foxborough, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is when I look at these teams above them, when I look at other teams' pass rushes and some other teams' secondaries and linebackers in a second here, I just couldn't put the Patriots above them because it's like, yeah, they're going to be stout. They're going to be really good, but we play them week 1. Am I fearing playing the New England Patriots defense? No, they're a good, solid unit, but I'm not scared of anyone on that defensive front, right? Coming in at numbers really 5 through 7 here, I have the same division. However you want to rank these groups,
I know where you're going here.
Is fine with me. At number 6 or number 7, I had the Ravens. Number 6, I had the Browns. Number 5, I had the Pittsburgh Steelers. When you look at the Ravens, obviously you're looking at their linebackers, right? And you're looking at oh my God, why am I drawing a blank? Not thinking of his name.
Humphrey.
Marlon Humphrey. Duh.
Yeah.
There it is. You're looking at Marlon Humphrey and you're looking at those safeties and they're stacked from the back, but they lose guys like Calais. They lose guys up front where that pass rush isn't as sturdy anymore. It's not as ferocious, as vicious. So I do have the Ravens down at number 7, and I've ranked the other 2 ahead of them, like the Browns, like the Steelers, because of those pass rushes, man. You have Denzel Ward back there for the Browns. You have guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick. They draft Joey Porter Jr. for the Steelers, but those pass rushes are just too good. You're talking about TJ Watt, right? You're talking about Cam Hayward. You're talking about Myles Garrett. You're talking about who did they bring? Zadarius Smith, right? So that's why I have the Browns and the Steelers ahead of them. So Ravens 7, Browns 6, Steelers 5. We get into the top 4 here. Not sure if this is the same top 4 you were alluding to. Coming in at number 4, I do have the New York Jets. This is a team that I think could be the best defense in football if they stay healthy. But some of the declarations those young players are making over there, the 85 Bears is being talked about a lot today. You gotta hit the brakes a little bit there. So coming in at number 4 is the New York Jets. At number 3, I do have the Dallas Cowboys. We talked about them earlier. You talk about Micah Parsons. You talk about DeMarcus Lawrence. They have one of the top cornerback duos in the league now with Stephon Gilmore and Trayvon Diggs. They're stacked up front, and they bolstered their defensive back unit this offseason. I have the Cowboys at 3. Slightly ahead of them, I do have our Philadelphia Eagles, who at times this year I think are going to show flashes and have weeks of being the best defense in football. With their pass rush, we know how we're going to rotate the defensive line. You have Darius Slay, James Bradbury, Avonte Maddox, but they are vulnerable up the middle with the safety position as far as we think, and the linebacker position. So we'll see there. And at number 1, I do have the San Francisco 49ers. This was a team over the last 2 years that has kind of been hit with the injury bug. Now Nick Bosa is holding out at the moment. So until he comes, if he's out, I don't have them as the number 1 defense, but he will play at some point in time coming up soon. So I have the San Francisco 49ers at number 1.
No, I like it. I like it, man. I actually I had at least everybody you mentioned either as an honorable mention or in my list itself. So I think we'll agree a good bit here, although a few different teams in different places. But number 10, man, I actually went with the Miami Dolphins. And, I might be falling for the big names on this defense, right? But when I look at this team, they have 2 components that I really like when I'm looking at a defense. And as you mentioned earlier, one is the pass rush. You talk about Bradley Chubb, David Long Jr., Jalen Phillips. I think all of these guys are premier pass rushers in the NFL. And then they're backed up by a nice, sturdy duo of cornerbacks in Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard. Now, the question mark, obviously, Jalen Ramsey was dealing with a little bit of an injury to start preseason and such. So we'll see how that irons out. They did bring in Eli Apple, which I know people aren't high on him at all, but a quality backup, right? He played on the Bengals defense that got to the Super Bowl, got to the AFC Championship back-to-back. It was a very effective defense. He talked a lot of stuff. You hope that he learned his lesson before bringing that to Miami, but nonetheless, I like their two components there with the pass rush, and then you got the secondary to balance it out, like their safety, Javon Holland, as well. Number 9, I'm going to stay in that division. I actually went with the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills, they're interesting because last year they obviously had a really down year when it comes to their defensive standing. But there was a lot of injuries, right? Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. I think even Matt Milano was gone for the season at one point, a quality linebacker. So they're going to get all of those guys back. They signed Jordan Poyer back, Matt Milano, Von Miller. He's going to return at some point this season. One of the best edge rushers in the league. Tre'Davious White finally starts the season healthy for once. He's a guy that's been beat up over the last few years. We'll see what he still has left in the tank, but I do like their young second-year corner in Kaiir Elam. But the big thing with the Bills, man, it's just the pedigree. Like, you're talking about Leslie Frazier, who's like one of the renowned defensive minds in the NFL. And then their head coach, Sean McDermott, which he obviously piles on to that defensive pedigree. He's not an offensive guy. He's there for defense as well. So I think they get back into the top 10 this year just by getting healthy.
Very fair.
Number 8, I went with the New England Patriots as well. I believe we had them in the same exact spot. Everything you said there, they're not a big name defense outside of Matthew Judon. Obviously, he had 15 and a half sacks last year, something like that. I was doing my research on him because, as you mentioned, I was, looking around. I'm seeing them in like top 5 listings for defensive rankings. So I looked into some of their players. There was this linebacker / I imagine he's an edge, Josh Uche, something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. UCHE. But he had an 11 and a half sacks last year. So we probably should know his name if he's getting into the double digits there. So they have a little bit of a pass rush there between him and Judon. And then you throw in their second round pick, Keon White. But nonetheless, I agree with everything you said regarding like the big lack of big names. There's nobody in the secondary that's going to wow you, but they have a bunch of guys that can do their job. When you're talking about like Jabril Peppers, they still got Jalen Mills out there, Kyle Duggar, nice young safety. And they added Christian Gonzalez out of the draft, first round as well, to pair with Jack Jones in the corner department. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what they can put together. Obviously, Bill Belichick, as you mentioned, he's a mastermind when it comes to that. Number 7, once again, another one of the teams you mentioned. I have the Denver Broncos here. I think they're getting overlooked a good bit considering they do have.
Man. I saw them at like 12 and 13 on rankings.
Yeah, they have a top 13 or a top 3 corner in the NFL. Excuse me. And they were a sturdy team. You remember the whole talk about however many games they would have won if they would have just scored over 21 points or something like that. They would have had a winning record.
I think it was actually 17 points. I literally think it was 17
points. So, even better in the case for this defense. And they picked up guys like Frank Clark, Zach Allen from the Cardinals. They have Randy Gregory still there. Alex Singleton getting the start there in Denver on that sturdy defense too, man. That's impressive of him. Justin Simmons, nice safety back there. They got levels to that defense, and they brought back Vance Joseph this year. So that should be interesting as well. Love the Denver Broncos defense up in that high altitude. Number 6, I went with the Baltimore Ravens. I do agree with you though. When you look at their pass rush, there is a little bit of a concern there. Just because you lose Calais Campbell. There had to be somebody there last year that I'm forgetting. I can't remember specifically, but they did bring in Jadeveon Clowney, which here or there, right? Like he's been up and down in his career. They added Michael Pierce. He's a veteran, but still just no premier pass rusher there. They have really good linebackers, Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith. They have good safeties, Marcus Williams.
Very good safeties.
Kyle Hamilton is the one I'm forgetting. That's the guy, right? And then you mentioned Marlon Humphrey earlier, who's a lockdown corner, right? So they got some staples there. Baltimore is a team that has lived and died by the identity of a tough Stonewall defense as well. So I'll be interested to see what they can do with the pass rush, see what they can do with some of those pieces. But nonetheless, I agreed with you. I couldn't put them over the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, who I have at number 5. They have arguably the best defensive player in the NFL in TJ Watt. And I don't expect that to drop off this season, right?
No, I do not.
I expect him to keep that up. Minkah Fitzpatrick, you talk about another position where they have arguably the best or top 5 safety in the NFL. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, you spent a lot of time on the injured list last year. He comes back. Patrick Peterson, you mentioned Joey Porter Jr., so they kind of stabilized that corner room. And then they have like low key guys like Quan Alexander, right?
Yep.
Keanu Neal, Desmond King, they picked up from the Texans,
They're deep,
another
man.
corner. So that's a pretty deep team. Still got Cam Hayward there on the defensive line. It's a deep team. Mike Tomlin, that Pittsburgh steel wall. It's a tough place. It's a tough team to play. So love the Steelers defense this year. Now here we get to the same top 4. We have the exact same top 4. They're just in a little bit of different order here. So I went with Dallas at number 4. Ultimately, I think let me put it this way. With these top 4 defenses, it's going to be hard to find weaknesses on any of them in reality. It goes down to what you prefer, I believe, at that point. And what it comes down to, I love the Dallas pass rush, right, with Micah Parsons. You love the corner duos. But the linebackers, the safeties, they're up in the air. I would say just about as much as the Eagles, but the thing for me, and maybe this is where the bias comes in with the Eagles possibly, I feel that Reed Blankenship is such a question mark, but a positive question mark, that I would rather have him than a guy that is just above average on the Dallas Cowboys.
I agree.
So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. It's boom or bust with that situation. But nonetheless, Dallas, it's ultimately because of the safety play and the linebackers. Now, there's no argument for the Eagles in the linebacking department, right? We just have to assume that they're going to use some of their edge rushers in that department and in that regard.
Or Nakobe Dean turns out to be what we were expecting and hoping out of the 3rd round last year.
Because I think Nakobe Dean's ceiling, I'm once again taking that over Leighton Vander Esch.
Yeah.
Like, might sound crazy.
2 years ago, I would have said you're nuts because I was pretty high on Leighton Vander Esch when he first came into the league.
When he came out of the draft,
we all thought he was the Sean Lee replacement, remember? And then
that calmed down really quick.
Pad, he's got it going, but
remember when they had Jalen Smith, man? We thought that was going to be like a duo linebacker core. He looked really good on their team, and then all of a sudden his career went downhill fast. But nonetheless, I have Philly at number 3, right ahead of the Cowboys. It comes down to depth, though, right? You talked about that earlier in the NFC East preview. I think depth is what separates the Eagles significantly. I shouldn't say significantly. It's what makes the difference between the Eagles at 3 and the Cowboys at 4. If Hassan Reddick goes down, what do the Eagles look like compared to the Cowboys if Micah Parsons goes down? The Eagles look a lot better, and that's my calling card there. Number 2, I went with the New York Jets. You mentioned it. They're getting a lot of hype. There's a ton of talent on that defense, man. They're stacked. But it starts with Quinnen Williams and it starts with Sauce Gardner at that corner spot and Quinnen Williams on that defensive line. They're 2 of the best, if not the best, at each of their positions. And they're 2 of the most significant positions in the NFL when you're talking about corner and defensive tackle. So I like what they're doing there. We'll see if they can hold up their end of the bargain. But I do think between Robert Saleh getting more acclimated with his position with the team, obviously a defensive mind, I also think the addition of Aaron Rodgers benefits that defense because they're going to be off the field a lot more. Right? They're going to be able to contain that energy, not use as much energy throughout a game because they won't be on the field as much. The Jets offense won't be going through a bunch of 3-and-outs with Zach Wilson, right? So I think that will benefit the Jets. And then number 1, obviously, we're going with the San Francisco 49ers. We both had them number 1. And it speaks for themselves, right? They ultimately, I think they lost a safety, Jimmy Ward. He was a starting safety for them. But they go out and they get reinforcements. They bring in Javon Hargrave to man that defensive line. They add that to that crazy pass rush.
Armstead's a freak.
Armstead, Bosa, all of these guys.
Their linebackers are Fred Warner.
The linebacking core is untouchable in the NFL. I mean, between Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, you're talking about 2 of the best guys in the league.
For sure.
And then they added a safety in Jair Brown just to kind of fill that Jimmy Ward role. And they never have significant names in their secondary, it feels like. Now,
But they're
their young
solid.
safety, Hufanga, he's getting a lot of hype. I think he's almost getting a little overrated, but he had a good rookie season. I'll give him credit where it's due. But the corners, it almost always feels like they're not like some big name corners, but they're physical and they'll do their job. Now, Charvarius Ward, he is a pretty solid corner that they got from Kansas City. I believe that was before last season.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that defense is stacked. But a lot of similarities, as I mentioned. I think the Browns and the Saints are the only two teams that I didn't have from your list. But once again, those guys are right here sitting in my honorable mentions. They would be right outside of the top 10.
Same with the Bills and the Dolphins for me.
They could easily get into that top 10, man. I also listed the Bengals. They lost personnel, couldn't put them in the top 10, but they still have that pedigree.
Dude, when I was researching, there was a article that had the Commanders at number 7.
Yeah, I saw that, man. Which I get it, like the pass rush, but like I don't know.
Yeah,
putting a lot of stock into that young secondary, I would say. Like you know, they got some young guys in that secondary that people tend to like, but you got to see it to believe it first.
No, man. I agree. No, the Jets and the Dallas thing sticks out to me, right? Because I wanted to put New York ahead of Dallas. It's just, I don't know. I guess I wanted to not validate Dallas a little bit, but I was trying too hard not to let the bias overcome me. But I still think if I had to pick a unit, I would probably take the Jets over Dallas, maybe slightly. I don't know.
I think Dallas, they'll get you the sacks, they'll get you the interceptions, and I think the Jets will too. Maybe just not as many sacks, maybe not as many interceptions, but I think they're more reliable. They're more sturdy, right? It doesn't come down to just turnovers and sacks, but I think with those top 4, man, let me take San Fran out of that. I think they are the designated number 1, but those 3 teams right there, the Jets, the Eagles, and the Cowboys, I think you could put them in any order that you want, and I wouldn't have much argument for it because they all have different star level talents at the base of them. So Eagles over Dallas because of depth, New York Jets over the Eagles just because of the talent level, right? But it is all arguable, I would say, between those 3.
But here's the funny thing, right? You talk about moments, and that's kind of why I said I would probably take New York's unit over Dallas's unit if I had to rethink it, because in those big moments you mentioned, they're going to have the sack totals, and Mike is a beast, and they're going to get their share of interceptions. But when it comes down to it, in a game they need to win, is that defense stout enough to rise to the occasion? Right. I think New York is that tough defense where cold weather, win and get into the playoffs or something like that, they show up. But it's funny, like we hold San Fran to the standard, and I do agree. I had them as number 1 as well, and they were beat up last year on that side of the ball a bit. But what happened in the NFC Championship game?
Hey, look, I'll put it this way, Dylan.
I mean, Brock Purdy didn't play defense.
The number 1 rushing offense is always going to dominate the number 1 rushing defense. And I say that in a sense of the number 1 passing offense is always going to win against the number 1 passing defense. Like the best offense is always going to be better than the best defense, in my opinion. So I think that's maybe where that comes to a head. But no, we ran the ball down their goddamn throats. And Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner were there. Nick Bosa was there. Eric Armstead was there. Like they had their guys there. So I'm not even giving them that type of excuse. But no, I think the Eagles offense, like we can't judge defenses off of what the Eagles offense does to them because the Eagles offense is ridiculous. So but to that point,
the play.
Other people need to give our offense that credit, though, for that to stand tall, right?
But then I have to play devil's advocate here, where we go through these ups and downs, these wins and losses, and we evaluate them, and we react. And after the Super Bowl, after Jonathan Gannon's Super Bowl performance, one of our main takeaways was that we were fooled by this defense. Well, to your point about how you know it's the Eagles' offense. we're holding the Eagles defense accountable for what
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes did to them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's just to play devil's advocate there. They do have to show up in big moments. It is an offensive league now that
Yeah.
everything favors the offense, favors the quarterback, favors points,
Yeah.
the receiver, everything. But the top units get the job done more times than not. They get that stop, they get that turnover, that strip sack, whatever it is at the big moment. And it's just like, does Dallas kind of lack that in that department?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I
But
feel you.
interesting
I feel you.
nonetheless, man. The Dolphins are definitely a team. The Bills as well, because the Bills were beat to shit last year.
Yeah. There is a chance with the
Been
Bills.
healthy forever.
There's a chance with the Bills that they could be approaching a decline, though. Like Tre'Davious White, he's healthy this year. You hope that he's still a number one corner in the NFL, but maybe he's not. Maybe he's declined. Maybe he's not that player anymore. Same thing with guys like Von Miller. I'm not going to sit here and doubt Von Miller, but he's coming off of what? Torn ACL? And
I look at Von Miller almost in the same light I look at like Odell Beckham Jr. And maybe that's because they both went to the Rams to get a ring and coming off the injuries and old. But like, I look at no one fears Von Miller anymore.
Yeah, if he's playing, I mean, I don't know. Not with our offensive line. Like, I don't fear it for the Eagles. I do think he's still a game wrecker, though. Before the last injury, I should say.
I think he's
like when he was on the Rams, he was a game wrecker.
I think he's got big playability left in him. I don't know if he's a game wrecker anymore at this point, even if he stays on the field. The Rams Super Bowl, yeah.
But he had Aaron Donald beside him too.
2 years ago. You know what I mean? Yeah. And injuries further down. I don't think he has that burst off the line of scrimmage. I don't think he's as strong as he was 2 years ago.
I do feel you there. I guess when I'm looking at Von Miller versus OBJ, I'm looking at like Von Miller early in his career, at least with the Broncos. Like he did his thing getting that ring, right? Like I don't think like OBJ. I don't know. Let me not discredit OBJ's ring because he did go off in the Super Bowl, but I just think like Von Miller has contributed a little bit more to like winning over his career. But I do feel you though, just like the hype versus the injury history. I do get you.
With that said, that is going to wrap up our top 10 NFL defenses heading into the 2023 season. The season kicks off tomorrow night. Lions, Chiefs will be live 6:30 to break that game down for you guys.
Yep.
And send us your comments and thoughts and predictions on the game. We'll try to give out some of our favorite bets, player props, everything like that. But tomorrow afternoon, make sure you have notifications turned on for this YouTube channel, that DSM-Media-Turf Talk YouTube channel, because we will be dropping our 2023 playoff predictions, AFC, NFC predictions, seeding, everything like that, to kick off the year. So for myself, for Scotty, have a great rest of your Wednesday.